In the face of danger, who will step forward and who will fall behind?
The air felt heavier as we emerged from the cave, the jungle seeming to close in tighter around us. Ava's shoulders were hunched as she clutched the old satchel against her chest, her gaze fixed on the ground. Marco walked ahead, his steps brisk, as if putting distance between himself and the memory of the guide would somehow lessen its sting. I lingered at the back, my eyes scanning the shadows for signs of movement. The whispers had quieted, replaced by an unsettling silence that made every rustling leaf sound like a threat.
He didn't have to die,
Ava said suddenly, her voice sharp in the stillness. I glanced at her. It wasn't your fault. She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression a mix of anger and grief. Wasn't it? I pushed us to go deeper, to keep moving forward, and now— Enough! Marco interrupted, his tone clipped. Dwelling on it won't bring him back. We need to focus on surviving. Ava glared at him, but I stepped between them before the argument could escalate. He's right, I said, though the words tasted bitter. The best thing we can do now is make sure his death wasn't in vain. As we continued, the jungle seemed to shift around us. Paths that had been clear moments before became overgrown with vines, and the trees seemed taller, their branches weaving into an impenetrable canopy. It's like the island is alive, Ava murmured, her fingers brushing against the bark of a tree that pulsed faintly with light. Alive and angry, Marco muttered, kicking a loose rock. I didn't say anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The weight of unseen eyes pressed down on me, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. It wasn't long before we came across a new obstacle, a massive wall of twisted roots and thorns blocking the path entirely. What now? Marco asked, crossing his arms. Ava stepped closer, examining the wall. There's something written here, she said, brushing away a layer of moss. The symbols glowed faintly as she touched them, and the whispers returned, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Sacrifice. The path demands a price. After hours of navigating the jungle, we reached an open clearing. At its center stood the entrance to what could only be described as a labyrinth. The structure was made of towering stone walls covered in intricate carvings, some of which glowed faintly in the fading light. This must be it, Ava said, her voice tinged with awe. The next test, I muttered, gripping the shard blade tightly. Marco groaned. Let me guess, more cryptic warnings and death traps? Ava shot him a glare but didn't respond. Instead, she stepped forward, examining the carvings near the entrance. These symbols are different, she said. They're guiding us. What do they say? I asked. She traced her fingers along the carvings, her brow furrowing. It's not clear, but it talks about choices, paths taken, paths untaken, and consequences. The labyrinth was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse faintly with light, the carvings shifting subtly as we moved. The air was heavy with a strange energy, and the whispers grew louder with every step. The first fork in the path came quickly, splitting into 3 separate corridors. Each was marked with a symbol, a flame, a wave, and a spiral. What do we do? Marco asked, his voice tight. Ava studied the symbols carefully. The flame represents destruction, the wave, renewal, the spiral, transformation. I think we're supposed to choose based on what we value most. That's absurd, Marco snapped. We don't have time for riddles. Do you have a better idea? I asked, stepping between them. He glared at me but said nothing. We go left, Ava said, pointing to the corridor with the wave. Renewal makes the most sense. It suggests growth, continuation. I nodded. Let's go. The corridor narrowed as we moved, the walls pressing close enough that I could touch both sides with outstretched arms. The carvings grew more intricate, depicting scenes of people facing impossible choices. A mother leaving her child to save her village. A leader sacrificing their life to end a war. The whispers became voices, clearer, sharper. What will you give? What will you lose? The first hallucination came suddenly. One moment I was walking beside Ava, and the next, I was standing in a different jungle, the air thick with smoke. I saw myself shouting orders to a group of people, their faces blurred. Flames roared in the distance, and a child's voice called out for help. I turned to run toward the voice, but the whispers stopped me. Your choice condemns them all. I froze, torn between the child's cries and the people behind me. When I turned back, both paths were gone, replaced by an empty void. Ethan! Ava's voice pulled me back, and I stumbled, gasping for air. Are you okay? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I'm fine, I lied. The whispers grew deafening as we reached the heart of the labyrinth, a circular chamber with a pedestal at its center. On the pedestal lay a glowing orb, its surface swirling with light and shadow. This is it, Ava said, stepping forward. Wait, I said, holding out a hand. Look around. The chamber was lined with statues, each one depicting a person in a moment of agony or triumph. At their feet were plaques engraved with names and dates. This isn't just a test, I said. It's a record. Everyone who's made it this far, and what they lost. Marco's expression darkened. What are you saying? I'm saying the island demands a price, I said. If we take the orb, one of us might not make it out. The silence that followed was suffocating. We've come too far to stop now, Ava said finally. If we leave empty-handed, everything we've done will have been for nothing. Marco stepped forward, his jaw tight. Then let's get it over with. As Marco reached for the orb, the room trembled. The statues seemed to come alive, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The whispers rose to a crescendo. One must fall for others to rise. Before I could react, Marco turned to me, his eyes blazing with anger and desperation. You've been slowing us down this whole time, he spat. If anyone's staying behind, it's you. He lunged, but I sidestepped, grabbing his arm and forcing him back. Stop it! Ava shouted, trying to pull us apart. The pedestal began to glow, and a deep, resonant hum filled the chamber. It's me, Marco said suddenly, his voice breaking. I'll do it. Before I could stop him, he placed his hand on the orb. The light enveloped him, and he smiled faintly before vanishing, leaving behind only silence. Ava fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. He didn't have to do that. I placed a hand on her shoulder, my own chest heavy with guilt. He made his choice. The whispers were silent now, replaced by a profound stillness. We need to keep moving, I said gently. We're not done yet. Ava nodded, wiping her eyes. Together we left the chamber, the orb's light still glowing faintly in the distance.